What if there was nothing you had to do right now? What if everything was absolutely fine and was holding together with a frequency that is completely capable of continuing to run every little thing in your world, in the whole universe? What if you let yourself relax into being exactly who you are? What would change? Notice your breath. Even when you have not been paying attention, your breath has kept you alive. Notice your heart. Even when you forget about your heart and things are much too noisy to hear its steady beat, your heart has kept beating for you. Notice the earth as it turns, and all the stars in the sky continue to shine, and the planets and the moon are all held in their perfect formation, even without us doing anything to keep it all going. Everything is just as it should be. There is nothing that is not okay. What does your beautiful mind say in response to all of that? It usually has a lot to say. Our minds can be very busy telling stories of what should be different. It is almost as if it had been programmed to watch for what is wrong. But what if our minds could be at peace with the world just as it is? That would change everything. What if there is nothing wrong with the world as it is? What if there is nothing wrong with your neighbors, your friends, your family? What if you could realize deeply that there is nothing wrong with your own self? What if you could love you just as you are? Loving ourselves is such a difficult thing to understand when we look at the world through the lens of what is right or wrong. There's a story from an ancient text that talks about when this lens of seeing everything as good or bad, right or wrong all began. It all started with a little taste, tasting the fruit of knowing good and evil. And that one taste has changed everything for everyone. When we think in terms of good and bad, right or wrong, it's like we instantly are enslaved. We no longer live in freedom. We no longer accept ourselves and our neighbors and our family and our friends. This lens of knowing good and bad as rules outside of our inner knowing becomes this dominant force, and it overrides all of our sovereign existence and connection to all that is. We become wrong most of the time, and we are consumed with striving to be right. As children, our parents and our community did their best to train us and teach us about right and wrong. Their intention was to help us. They didn't want us to be on the wrong side of good and evil, and so we learned that we were often wrong as they worked hard to correct us. And to survive in this hostile world of good and evil, we tried to prove that we were right and good so that we could be loved and accepted and so we could belong. We wanted to be sure that other people saw us as good too, so we learned to cover our ass. When we were children, we were programming our subconscious minds to help us survive. With our limited understanding of the world around us, we tried to make sense of everything. We desperately tried to get our needs met, and when our needs were not met by the adults in our world, we often used the rules of good or bad to explain why. At the end of it all, what most of us walked away from our childhood with was a belief of, I am wrong, I am bad, I am not good enough. This course is all about that. We were not meant to go through life just seeing things as good or bad or right or wrong. That's just like seeing the world as black and white and missing all the colors and shades that paint a much more complete picture than the limiting two-dimensional lens of good or bad. What a sin. There is so much more to observe when we choose to set that lens aside and allow ourselves to begin adjusting and then truly see through the lens of freedom and limitless possibility. This is reaching into the realm of all that is, into the fifth dimension, beyond space and time, into spirit, into Life itself, living in connection with all that is what you came here to do. You came here to create your own version of heaven on earth. That is impossible to do if you insist on handcuffing yourself to the rules of seeing the world as good and bad, right and wrong. If you want to finally learn to love yourself and to love your life, please continue. You are perfectly imperfect. You are imperfectly perfect. You are perfectly creating your reality in every single moment that you're alive. The truth is, there is nothing wrong with you or the reality you're creating. Once you step outside about everything being right or wrong, you can finally step outside of being small. It takes courage to stop doing what you're supposed to do. It is bravely bold when you decide to stop playing small and creating a version of yourself that is at the mercy of the world. The act of choosing to rise above the limits of the lens of good and bad is like when Jim Carrey's character, Truman Burbank, in the concluding scene of the movie comes to understand that his world is not real, it is a reality show. He walks across the water and leaves behind this make-believe world and everything he had known to be true or real. Here he says his famous line, "If I don't see you, good morning, good afternoon, and good night." And he leaves that limited version of his life, which was ultimately someone else's creation, to go and embrace his own life. Leaving the old life. I wish that we could see Truman Part 2 as he goes on to define for himself what he wants his life to be, but that's not the point. Living life for yourself is no longer for everyone to see. It isn't about everyone else. When you decide to rise above good and bad, right and wrong, your life becomes your life. This becomes about what you want. If there are no longer rules and parameters about what is good or bad to direct your decisions, there are so many other things on which to base your decisions. With no good and bad as a standard, people often feel lost and afraid and overwhelmed with so much choice. So then how do you decide what you really want your life to be? Deciding what you want your life to be means that you are no longer living by everyone else's rules. This requires that you put on your big girl panties and you do what's best for you. You are no longer looking for someone else to validate your choices because there is no good or bad. There is only what you prefer. You are no longer trying to please or impress anyone. Your parents, your teachers, your boss, your spouse, your friends, your neighbors. The truth is, they will most likely be incredibly impressed as you step out of being a tiny-ass girl and into being the grown-ass woman that you were meant to be. But I'm afraid. That's okay. What are you afraid of specifically? Can you allow yourself to get curious about your fear? Some people find it helpful to journal and write those fears down. It can feel like by doing that, the fear begins to be released and it's so much easier to be objective. I'm so glad you're here. You belong. You are perfect, just as you are. I'm excited for this next 3-month journey with you, with so much love.